Well, hey there, friends. We're back with another brief teaching from the new City Catechism, and this week we have arrived at question and answer 24. And we've discussed in recent weeks, we've discussed why Jesus had to be fully human in order to accomplish our redemption, and last week we discussed why Jesus had to be fully God in order to accomplish our redemption. And so today we're going to be tackling the question of why Jesus had to die in order to accomplish our redemption. Why did it have to be this way? And so let's dive in. The question answer 24 says this: why was it necessary for Christ, the Redeemer, to die? Answer: since death is the punishment for sin, Christ died willingly in our place to deliver us from the power and penalty of sin and bring us back to God. By his substitutionary atoning death, he alone redeems us from hell and gains for us forgiveness of sin, righteousness, and everlasting life. All right, so why did Jesus have to die? Right? Couldn't there have been some other way? Couldn't God have found a way around this? Right? And the Catechism gives us a two-part answer to this question. It says first, rather, that death is the punishment for sin. And secondly, that because death is the appropriate punishment for sin, the only way that a substitutionary atonement could be made was through death. So we'll tackle those two in order. And so firstly, Jesus had to die in order to accomplish our redemption simply because death was the just and due penalty for sin. The Apostle Paul says this in no uncertain terms in Romans 6. He says, the wages of sin is death. So it's pretty clear that the only way to pay for sin is through death. And this is because God is just. Right? We talk about God's justice as being one of his attributes. And because God is just and perfectly just, he cannot let injustice go unpaid for. He can't just sweep it under the rug, right? It can't. There was no other way around this. It had to be paid for, and the penalty was death. If God had not gone through with that, it would have been a violation of his own nature. And because God is perfect, he would not do that. And so the righteous wrath of God had to be poured out on someone. In order for you and I to be freed from our enslavement to sin, someone had to die. But not just anyone could do it, right? And we talked about this before. It had to be a truly righteous someone, because the Heidelberg Catechism puts it this way: one who himself is a sinner cannot pay for others, right? And so Jesus, the only righteous human to ever walk the earth, volunteered himself for death in our place in order to satisfy the wrath of God against our sin. Okay, which brings us then to the second point of the answer, or the second sentence in our answer, which is that Jesus had to die in order to be our substitute, right? The Catechism answer says that his death was a substitutionary atoning death. All right, and atonement is a word which simply means making something that is wrong right again. And in order to make us who were sinful to be sinless, or to be righteous, Jesus needed to take our place and take our penalty on himself. And in taking our place, the place of sinners, he gave us his righteousness. Right? 2 Corinthians 5:21 says this: for our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin. Okay, so Jesus, who knew no sin, became sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. This is the great exchange that happened on the cross, right? This is the crux of the gospel. The wrath of God against our sin was poured out on the only innocent man to ever live. And because Jesus volunteered himself to do that for us, we received his perfect, spotless moral record. So in his death, Jesus not only paid our debt, right? An insurmountable debt that we could never pay for ourselves, but he also clothed us in his righteousness, so that now when God looks at you or me, he doesn't see a hopeless sinner deserving of death, but rather he sees the righteousness of Christ, right? The one about whom he said in Matthew 3, he said, "This is my beloved Son with whom I am well pleased." He sees the righteousness of Jesus when he looks at us. Now, we've been reconciled to him through the death of Christ. And all of this couldn't be summarized more beautifully than it is in one of my favorite hymns of all times. The hymn, "Before the Throne of God Above." And we sing it sometimes in church. But verse 2 says this. These just amazing, amazing lyrics. It says, "Because the sinless Savior died, my sinful soul is counted free. For God the just is satisfied to look on him and pardon me." How amazing is that? All right. That's it for this week. I will see you back here next time, guys.